Hey guys, what's up? What's up? This is your girl, Letitia Ricks, host of the podcast Work, Hustle, Balance. This is a podcast for the everyday worker, the everyday hustler, and that person that's just trying to balance it all. I am super excited to bring on our next guest, Hobart Ruffin. Applause. Give it up for him. Woo! I'm going to let him introduce himself, but I had the pleasure of working with him back in tech. But he's got some exciting things going on. So we're going to dive right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us what you've got going on.
Yeah, I left the tech world, was part of the Meta layoffs back in November. Prior to then, I had already started my company HDR Talent Acquisition Solutions, that sort of took that by the reins during this open time, uh,
Nice.
just to be a bit more entrepreneurial. I've been in the recruiting space for 10 years, some in agencies, some in on the corporate side. Uh, Love sales and working with people, so it just sort of fits naturally.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes. And I resonate with that because I also was a part of the Meta layoffs in November. I was sadly laid off on my day off during maternity leave, which is absolutely insane. But it was exciting because just like you, I had already had my business established. So tell us a little bit about that. How were you able to start your HDR talent in the midst of being an employee? What was that like, kind of having to balance both?
Yeah, I think I've got to give some kudos to my wife, who is a multi-time entrepreneur.
Yes, kudos to the wifey.
Pops in and out of the space, and she tapped me on the shoulder one day and said, you give people all of this advice for free, and you should probably charge for it because you're really good at what
Mm,
you do. And I don't want to say that in like a condescending capitalistic type of way, but I would spend hours, right, helping people with their resume, helping them prep for interviews, and I wasn't charging.
wow.
And so I ended up talking to her marketer at the time, and her marketer, owned a small business and was like, I know a lot of people who could use this type of service. This is actually a really good idea,
Yeah.
in regards to helping companies focus on talent acquisition. Um, and how I balanced all of that was honestly finding the time where I could, right? Like I'm really good at time blocking, which I think is a skill you pick up if you're an effective recruiter. Uh,
Hmm.
I'm working from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm
Yeah.
going to take a 30-minute lunch break. And then at 5 o'clock, I'll start working on my business, seeing clients, squeezing meetings in when I can, and then also on weekends. So that's how I got started.
That is incredible. And I 100% identify with that because that's exactly what you have to do when you're like, an employee trying to dedicate your time to your employer's goals, but you've got your own, entrepreneurial goals in of yourself. So I love that. And I love to hear that wifey identified like, okay, no, we're not going to be doing this for free. You need to be able to monetize what you know. And I think there's a ton for people that are listening to this. Everybody knows something, especially if you've lived on this earth, long enough to become an expert at something. You have to be able to monetize on that thing that you know. So I love that. So tell us a little bit about, what you've been able to, how you've been able to impact, those that need your services. What has been the greatest achievement that you've seen so far as an entrepreneur in your space?
On the individual side, I think it's a lot easier word of mouth, right? With individuals,
Mm,
what I would call the standard, fixing your resume, helping you optimize your LinkedIn. I think where I differentiate is the ability to do interview preparation. I think my time
yes.
at Amazon taught me more than anything that oftentimes qualified people get in the door, but their inability to effectively interview is actually what stops them from being successful. So I think that's thing one. Thing two is that I've always coached and mentored people. So then giving career mentorship and career coaching, is something that I'm both passionate about and something that I'm pretty good at, right? It's a lot about mindset and how you can overcome obstacles. And then from the business side, when you asked about, something that I'm most proud of on the business side, I think is the largest portion of my business, the B2B piece, is helping companies optimize their recruiting processes.
Wow.
Because I've seen some of the best in the business do what they do, I'm able to come in and not necessarily say, hey, this is how you can replicate what Facebook does, or here's how you can replicate what Amazon does, but
Right.
here's what your process looks like, and here are the ways in which it could be better. So landed a contract or two with a few companies doing that, and
Amazing.
that's been really fun to come in and say like, hey, you could change some things here, implement a better candidate experience, hire more people, save some money. I think that's been the most fun.
I love that, especially coming from this recruiting background. We know too much. We have too much information, especially, seeing exactly like what you said, our friends that have incredible resumes. We look great on paper and they make it to, or we help them get to the door of the interview. And it's like, hey, let me guide you through this. And it's like, scratch everything that you know, because this is what you need to know in order to get to the door. So I love that you are creating that space. So I know that there are people that are listening right now that, hear that you are a coach, whether they're on the individual side, maybe they've got a small business and they want to recruit. Walk us through your process, specifically. I mean, maybe on both sides, because we've got both type of people listening. But I'd love to hear, like, if they're an individual, how can they get tapped into you? What is their process of kind of like going through that journey of kind of identifying the career, getting coached by you through that life cycle of getting the job and keeping the job and maybe progressing through the job? What does that look like?
Yeah, so my career coaching slash mentoring services, all of this can be found on my website, hdrtalent.com.
Oh yeah, the link will be is right in the podcast, you guys. So make sure you click that and tap in. Tap in. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, oh, yeah, no worries. So on the career coaching and mentoring side, it's a minimum of 3 months. Like what I've learned is that you have to go through this process of understanding someone, understanding their own limiting beliefs, helping them
Mm,
overcome those things, and then working on how they can optimize their workplace. I think it's so important to get outside perspective. And a
right.
lot of times, the same way with therapy, right? Like your therapist has this outside perspective on your life and can give you a new outlook on it, if you will. I think the same thing is important with your career, right? Understanding the things that have stopped you from being successful before, whether that's getting promoted in your current company, having a career pivot, or moving on to another company, right? And looking to, maximize your income potential in any of those spaces. I think the resume writing piece and the interview prep piece are pretty self-explanatory, right? Like you'll sign up, get a session. I'll help coach through those particular activities. And then on the B2B side, if you're looking to optimize your recruiting process, reach out, and then I'll do an initial assessment, right? I think
Mm,
things that differentiates me is I'm not trying to take everyone's money. So sometimes I'll look at someone's resume and I'll say, you know what, you actually don't need me. Your resume looks pretty good. This doesn't make sense for you to pay me. And I know that sounds crazy, but I'm big on doing the right thing. And for some businesses, it's like, hey, listen, you're too small right now for me to try to optimize a process for you, but I can show you some foundational things that would be helpful as you're building up. It depends on the size of the company and what their needs are. Sometimes you're having to go super deep and remove a ton of blockers. There may be
mm.
ATS issues for those not in the recruiting space. That's applicant tracking systems. Where your resume goes when you apply for a job. There may be issues there. There may be issues with your hiring managers. They may need training. There may be issues with your salary bands. The possibilities are sort of endless.
Amazing, amazing. And I mean, I personally know that you're a wealth of knowledge, but you guys tap in. Like, seriously, make sure you're tapped in. I love what you mentioned about just that integrity piece, because there aren't enough in entrepreneurs that have that integrity piece, where you're doing the right thing for the individual or the business. So that is incredible to hear. One of the things that you just mentioned that I think stuck out to me was just, that therapeutic, kind of it kind of matching therapy to being able to coach someone from a career perspective, kind of like that career therapy, so to speak. So thinking about, I know when I when I go to therapy, I pour it all on my therapist, and I can only imagine like that's one of the difficult things about being a therapist. So what has been, either the most difficult or most challenging component of like pivoting from being an employee to being a full-time career coach, and be on both sides, what has been kind of both the most challenging thing but also the most rewarding?
Um, I'll start with challenging. I'll definitely
Yes.
say that from a challenging perspective is that you have this ideal outcome of what being an entrepreneur is, right? Which is
Mm.
typically all of the rewards, right? I make my own schedule. I kind of do and operate as I want. However, the limiting part is that you're everyone, right? Like I'm IT. I am marketing, right? Like I'm having to meet with people, figure out if they're just trying to scam me to take my money to to produce my content on the internet, right? I'm my social media strategist. And so there's so many little things you have to do, right? Like building out, where are my clients going to be housed? How do I send out my invoices, right? How do I ensure all my bank accounts are set up appropriately? How am I ensuring that I'm paying for the right things at the right time? And I think that sort of day in and day out piece of it, in my opinion, is actually more of the grind. Because if you find the thing you love, that's always the fun part, and that's what you want to spend all your time doing. But if you're an entrepreneur, there's all of these other things you have to take on that aren't the things that you necessarily are interested in doing.
Love it, love it. And you're absolutely right. Like, and then you kind of consider, okay, maybe I should get an employee and then that'll take away from your bottom line. So I totally hear you. Now, you've got an incredible resume. What made you, what was it? What was the thing that took you to say, like, okay, we're going to go full-time entrepreneur. We're not going to go back. We're not going to look for a job. I'm not going to respond to these LinkedIn messages because, it's a great time to be Black in tech for sure and be able to get a job. So what was it for you that said, no, I'm not going to go back. I'm going to dive in and take a bet on me.
I think that I'm somewhere in the where's that place between heaven and hell?
Purgatory.
I think I'm in purgatory, right? Because the part of me that loves to train, develop, and teach others, to have a team around them, actually
Yeah.
misses I don't want to say a corporate environment, misses a company environment. So I do
Fair.
think that there's a part of me that would definitely be flexible to going back to, honestly, it's probably something on the agency side, right? Like development,
Yeah.
sales, because I think that would still grant me the freedom. You remove a lot of the constrictions you get in the corporate environment or working for big tech, and then simultaneously, give me all of those things like working with people again, because I really do miss that. But I think
Mm.
the thing that made me push over the last few months to really focus on the entrepreneurial piece is that it's and not to go off on my soapbox, but just for a minute, saying that
Go for it.
a lot of companies preach this idea of people over profits, but that's not actually the truth, right?
Right.
I am, even though I was in talent acquisition, I'm incredibly business savvy, right? And there's a lot of math that I can do really quickly on how a company's operating and the choices that they're making. And as soon as it became disadvantageous for even a moment for most of these companies to retain their employees, they had no problem, upending their lives. And I took a bit of time. Initially, I think my first response was get right back in there, start applying for roles. Then I think over time it was like, okay, what do I really want to do? Right? I
Right.
can't lie. You get into tech, the money's good, the environment's good, the benefits are good. So you sort of put blinders on, right? You're like,
Yep.
I can do this, right? Like there's no problem here. But being removed from the environment gives you new perspective, right? Like I don't miss sometimes 12 or 13-hour days, right? Like I don't miss the incredible levels of work that you have to put in, and the output it's not a meritocracy, right?
Right.
There's a limit to how much you'll get back out based on what you put in. And the second that you're not seen as a value add, right? Like then you're just a cost. And I think that is the part that doesn't resonate with me anymore, which is why going into a sales-based role feels a little different, because then you are producing the revenue and therefore you're treated a little differently. Not a ton,
Right.
right, but a little differently.
Right. No, and I agree. I couldn't agree more. I think that was what it was very similar for me, except for, of course, maternity kept me. And it was like, okay, well, I kind of got to focus on my babies right now. I can't even think about going back to work. Like, I literally can't think about that. So let me, kind of dive in and hone in. And to your point about, like, especially being in tech and working for an outcome or a goal, maybe promotion is it, but you could start thinking about scale, and you start thinking about how you can produce in an effort to scale. And you're like, oh, the sky is actually the limit for me. Like, I mean, the sky isn't the limit for me. Like, I can just keep going and keep driving and keep scaling. So what does scale look like to you? How do you see, either this business developing, so that um you're reaching your maximum goal? What are your maximum goals? Let's start there. What are your goals with your company, and then what does scale look like?
Let's call it in a I don't want to say perfect. Let's say in an ideal outcome
Yeah.
would be to take any part of my business, if not all parts of my business, and figure out how to automate as much as
Yep.
possible. It's very
Mm-hmm.
difficult to automate the auditing process itself, but
Mm,
out the mechanisms and then potentially bringing in consultants to do the work, so I can go out pitch the projects and then
yep.
have consultants work on the projects themselves. That would allow
Yep.
me to take on more than 5 or 6 projects at a time, maybe 10,
Right.
15, 20. And then ultimately having a master trainer who maybe can implement all of the strategies. And then eventually I take a step out. I think the one thing that I learned during this time period is that I really do like having time to myself. So at some point, that's probably the ideal outcome. Now, at one point, my wife and I discussed, and I think it was my mid 50s, right? I'd kind of had something constructed that would look like that, and maybe that's still the case, right? Like where I just kind of can have a couple of businesses running and operating on their own. But I think for the interview prep, it would be ultimately making courses or recording videos that would give the information to my clients that I'm serving them in a one-to-one capacity now, because I think that would allow for scale. And then same thing for resume writing, right? Hiring a team to actually do the resume writing, but my way, right? Because I do think there's a difference between how I do it versus how others have done it. I've seen people charge 2 or 3 times what I charge and don't produce really good resumes at all. And so I think that's just it's unfortunate, right? So hopefully that answered your question about scale.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, that is, I know you're coming from a really great integrity place, but that's an opportunity for you, as you continue to grow and people are seeing that value, that they're also identifying the value that comes with, hiring HDR talent as opposed to, Joe Schmo, who may be charging 2 or 3 times more, but the value isn't, what HDR talent is providing, leveraging all of what you've learned over the course of your entire career and packaging it in such a way that's blessing people, that's helping them get to their career goals. So I love what you've done. I love what you've built so far. I'm praying for you that you don't have to go back to corporate, because there's so many people that need what you have, that need that talent. So how do you keep yourself balanced? How do you keep yourself from looking at that 350K salary, or total comp salary, like, oh, that looks enticing, how do you keep yourself from doing that, and just how do you stay balanced so that all of the hard work that does go into your entrepreneurial goals, that kind of keep your eye focused on the prize of maintaining ownership, keeping your goals, that 50 goal, that automation goal. How do you keep your eyes on the prize and stay balanced?
I think balance is something I'm still seeking in this space, right? Like I feel
Right.
like I talk as if I've got it all figured out, and I really don't, right? Like it's important to go back to time blocking, figuring out the fundamentals. The difference is that I'm the person who has to hold myself accountable and responsible for all of the things that I put on the calendar or the ideas that I have. And that's different from, a manager or director saying to you like, hey, this needs to be done by the 21st. And you can kind of create this timeline because there's something that goes with it. But if I say the 21st and then I suddenly change my mind and make it the 25th, that's also okay because I'm making the decision. And that's something I want to be mindful of. And the other part is back to that purgatory. I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Like there's this upward opportunity out there for people with our skill set, right? Like where I could immediately go back to making 300K in the roles that I was working previously. That's probably the part that gets a little gray, right? The second I have a client that should have signed an agreement, this is a real scenario, a client that should have signed an agreement in the beginning of March and still hasn't signed the agreement, right? Like them signing the agreement is the difference between me making the income that I have anticipated or not, right? So there's this ebb and flow that I don't love, right? There is this part of the corporate life where it's like, all right, well, it's 5:45, 6 o'clock. I can kind of be done now, right?
Right.
And,
Right.
and I know exactly what's going to show up every other Friday. But I think from a balance perspective, it's maintaining my calendar, keeping myself accountable, and then trying to have accountability partners around me.
Mm.
I've had mentors my whole career, but getting more serious about my mentors and getting more serious about getting a coach of my own to ensure
Mm,
I stay in balance, regardless of which path I choose, because I know now all of the things that I'm capable of if I ever doubted them before.
yeah.
To ensure that I stay on the track to continue the momentum, whether it's balancing this and going back or just doing this, right? There's no way that I'm not doing some part of this. Uh,
Right.
but whichever way it looks, I'll need someone to sort of help keep me along the path.
I could not agree more. I resonate with everything you said. I had an SDM, for those that don't know, software development manager, one of my clients, when I was a recruiter back at Amazon, who told me that he lived and died by his calendar, and that was a mantra that I kept forever. Like, I lived and died by my calendar. Even today, I do. But to your exact point, it's like, okay, well, these kids are running around because I'm a full time mom. I'm a full time stay at home mom, and I'm a full time entrepreneur. So, I have to carve out my day around the kids' nap time, the kids', breakfast, their lunch. Like, okay, if I take a call, it's got to be during their nap time or when the husband comes home or when my oldest comes home. Like, I have to construct my day around that. But it's also like, okay, well, I scheduled this on the 25th. Maybe I don't feel like doing it on the 25th. I am my own boss. It comes with that purgatory of, okay, but, should I go back to corporate where I'm getting that salary because I got 10 outstanding invoices that are late, that people haven't paid yet? And I know for a fact that I'm going to get it, but it's just like when I'm able to, and I'm sure that you resonated with this, when we're able to apply something that we're really good at and see the outcome and see the impact of it, it just hits differently. You know what I mean? It hits so differently, that you made this direct impact. There has been, either a good outcome of it, a good review, or whatever that case may be. So what has been, kind of that drive for you? How has it been, what has been that one thing that's like, maybe it's a customer review that's like, okay, I've got to stay on this track as opposed to keep going this way.
I think the thing that's been rewarding is that I haven't had a customer yet that hasn't gotten what they wanted out of any of the services that I've
That's a
provided.
blessing. That's dope.
I'm sure that it will happen at some point, right? Like if you work with people long enough, that's bound to happen. But you want the positive interactions to outweigh the negative ones. And for me, that's really rewarding in my ability to know that what I believe I'm good at and what people have told me I'm good at, right, actually shows up on the other side, right? I know that I'm good at it because a person who's never met me before trusts me with their career. So I do their resume, I help them prep for their interview. Then they get a new job that pays them, I don't know, 40 or 50K more, right? And all of a sudden they're like, wow, this is really helpful. And I think that that's the rewarding piece because I sort of built that. And you get a similar response when you work in recruiting, but you do become numb to it, I would say, in the tech world, because for the most part, unless you're bringing someone from another tech company, you're always improving lives. So it becomes less a factor of you and just more of a factor of the company itself. But I think as an individual, that matters. On the business side, I think that because I've always thought like a business leader, right? Getting in the
Right.
room with these heads of HR and these business owners and like having these conversations about how their recruiting processes are broken and having them have that aha moment
Mm.
equally as rewarding, right? They're like, oh, well, this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. I should start listening. Yeah, I think those are the things that matter.
I love that. And I think one thing I loved about Amazon was their leadership principles. I know everybody has like like their thoughts around it, but I love Amazon leadership principles, and that earned trust is so real when you become an entrepreneur because you have to quickly earn trust of the people that are trusting you to get them from a point A to point B, trusting you with their resources, with their hard-earned, income or their budget to say, okay, I trust that you're going to do that. So I love to hear that. All right, so for the people that are listening that are maybe starting their journey, maybe they just got laid off also, but they've got that that business that they started or been thinking about. What is one thing that you would leave them with so that they are motivated to work, hustle, and balance?
All right. I motivated. There's the interesting
Yes.
part. Motivated, I think, is knowing that you can do it, right? Like that the
Mm,
difference between the people who make it and the people who don't is typically just trying. Right. And that you're bound to fall off more times than not, but eventually you'll get the hang of it. So like I think it's important to know, to have the mindset that you can do it, right? That it's
yep.
not going to be easy. Right. If everything falls into place, that's amazing. But I always tell my clients things like, J.K. Rowling was sleeping in her car when she wrote Harry Potter, right? I know everyone's not the biggest fan, but it's important to note where she was.
Yeah.
She wasn't living a posh lifestyle when she wrote the book. She was homeless. And Stephen King didn't get his first big break with Carrie until he was, I think, a high school teacher, and he was in his late 30s or early 40s. Like,
Wow.
for the most part, there's not this world where Mark Zuckerberg became a billionaire when he's in his early 20s. That's not normal. That's not the way it actually typically happens for most successful people. And that you're right around the corner from being able to accomplish it. You just actually have to get up and try it.
Love it. Love it. Yes, you guys, you heard it here first. Just get out, try it. Just do it. That's the difference from the person that's making it and thinking about it to the person that is putting one foot in front of the other, as we are here at Work Hustle Balance. So, and Hobart, I have an incredible mentor to connect you with. He's actually helped me with my digital products, from my ebook to my course. So I'm gonna plug him in with you, because I think he'll definitely be really good for you. So I'll share his information offline, but he's incredible, multi-billionaire in the digital commerce, or the digital course space. So I'll make sure to connect you. But I'm super excited to have spoken to you, talk to you, learn more about your business, learn more about your pivot, and how you took something that should have crushed, or to some people are going through just in a very emotional turmoil time of losing a high six figure, mid six figure career, to a place that is now going to, I trust and believe, will take your family to the next level. So I honor you, I support you, I'm praying for the best over you and your family. So until next time, you guys, make sure you tap in for all those people that are looking for career coaching, looking for career mentorship, or if you're a business and looking for the ways that you can make sure that you're hiring the best. Tap into Hobart right now. HDR Talent, we support you. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Hey,
Thanks
thank
for
you for
being here. Thanks for being here. Until next time, you guys, this is Work Hustle Balance. Have a wonderful, blessed day. See you in the next episode.